Jason, thank you. Welcome to Idea Generation.
Thanks for having me.
Cool. Well, one of the questions I like to start off with is, and I think it's very it's always an illuminating thing, thinking about where people come from and their families and how that dynamic plays into their professional lives. So how would you say that your parents' professional life informed your ambitions?
Well, I grew up in the Midwest in a classic Americana way, if you will. My mother is an educator. My father was all things. My grandparents were, physicians and chefs. So I grew up in a space of kind of classic, but there was some creativity there. And I was able to explore along with having these rules of quintessential American dreams. So it helped support me in so many different ways. When I think of being an artist or loving art, they allowed me to kind of explore, but also gave me these really messed up American ideas of boundaries. So it kind of like, I was able to kind of like juggle art, but also have this kind of like these boundaries of like, how are you going to pay your bills? So it was pretty interesting, but it helped me, know how to process work ethic, also process, dollars and cents of survival.
So do you see sort of the things that you saw in the house playing out in your professional life every day now?
Yeah, I come from a place where my mom was never really truly fashion oriented. She was more interior oriented. And she did this really interesting thing where like she would transition seasons with our house. Like when it turned into fall, the house shift, the color shift, the paints on the wall shift, the pillows on the sofa shifted. In the summertime, things got lighter, things got brighter, things got even more softer. And I realized for me in my life, that particular thing that I never knew would, be any type of adjustment or live or breathe anything into my work, I see it every day. Like I adjust with clients, I adjust with what's happening in the planet, I adjust when I go to different parts of the world. So those type of adjustments, I never really knew it would like penetrate and adjust and add to my work.
Interesting. I know as a teenager you got into skating. Mm-hmm. What was it about skate culture that drew you in?
I mean, for me, skate culture, growing up skating, it was just like the coolest thing to kind of just get away, and it was just so fast. I was able to go places very, very fast and get to see things outside of just my neighborhood. And I was able to go into this particular neighborhood, which was called the U City Loop in St. Louis, Missouri. Very alternative, super like edgy, cool, in a pocket of like uber wealth. Like it was surrounded by Washington University. So it was kind of like where the I don't want to say the outsiders, but kind of like these kind of really quirky and weird, as people would probably call back then, spaces. So it allowed me to kind of like go to places very fast and see all of these interesting, cool things. And it just so happened that all of my friends, we would meet up on our skateboards there. And it was bigger than just skateboarding. For me, it actually allowed me to see art and see people in a very fast and quick way.
Because of the proximity of where this actually took place, it took you outside of your neighborhood?
Yeah, my neighborhood was really great. It was fantastic, but it was classic Midwest conservative. Everybody's parents were like 9 to 5. There was nothing about art or eclectic anything. This particular pocket was close in proximity, but it felt so far away because everything you saw, it was a place where like this particular time, it was like there was a tattoo artist and there was like piercings there. And it was just like, it was this one really cool, interesting hair salon, which was called, Knots. And it was this woman used to do locks there. So you got to see a range of especially for me, I got to see a range of different type of people that I would only see in magazines or on television. But being able to be with my friends on a skateboard and get there so fast. And for me, it was just like, I was able to like move so fast on the skateboard and be with these kind of like, you know, just for me, I used to think they were all normal because I got to see people actually be themselves. So for me, the skate culture allowed me to experience just art and life.
It's funny, you mentioned, you know, sort of seeing icons on TV and in magazines. And I think for me growing up, if you looked at my high school bedroom, it was completely covered with cutout pictures from The Source and Rap Pages and Ego Trip and all the different hip hop magazines at the time. And there are certain outfits that are so indelible that I can still remember, like Redman wearing the Helly Hansen fit in The Source, or like Nas in the Columbia jacket, shot in Queensbridge. Are there any, like, what are the sort of the styling, you know, moments that were just sort of had you stuck as a teenager?
Mine were just like, shockingly, mine were like all across the board. And again, growing up in a household in the Midwest and having like really kind of interesting, but still yet conservative, you know, parents and people around you. Like I grew up watching, for example, Sidney Poitier to Surf with Love. And I would watch this really kind of super chic and just smart and smooth black man in London teaching these kind of like bad, horrible British kids, and just watching how smooth he was and watching how like put together he was. And then on the other side of it, I would watch things like, you know, Nirvana, 9 Inch Nails, Rage Against the Machine, and I would see that type of vibe and just kind of how like not put together, but so put together they were. And then on the other hand, I would see stuff like Toni Braxton, who was like, for me, was the beginning of me understanding fashion in such like this visual Hype Williams vibe of the time, and just seeing this woman being so styled, and like from Gucci Tom Ford days to like Versace. It was just, those are the things for me that stuck with me, watching those videos of like, you know, Unbreak My Heart, and then pairing it back to, you know, my Kurt Cobain days, and then also merging that with Sidney Poitier with Surf with Love. So that range for me was very iconic, and the things that were on my wall were things that looked like that. My mom would come in here and she'd be like, what is going on? This is the weirdest thing. I don't know what you're doing in there, Jason. Like, we need help. So my range was also very different in the sense of palette and collecting style and art.
I was speaking of that. I mean, you know, in the 2020s, people having like a very broad swath of influences is totally normal. In 1994, 1995, it definitely, the world was not quite like that.
Yes.
How were you being received, you know, both from the family and from people around you outside, for having such an eclectic set of influences and palette?
I mean, everybody thought it was weird. I was the epitome of code switch. Like, I would be with I was super popular in high school, so I had friends across the board, right? Some days I would hang out with the goth kids, my skater friends, the jocks, the cool kids. Like, I was across the board, so I was able to talk to everybody. And it was really weird because I went through this phase where, like, you know, Joni Mitchell was my vibe, or like, you know, I was the kid who also loved Dave Matthews, but I also went home and I was like, I could tell you the whole Machiavelli, you know, through and through. And then also in the same time, I could do every song from Anita Baker. But for me, it was just like, I was able to like live in all those spaces. And I can use my brothers for an example. They would be like, yo, what, huh? Like they would hear me playing certain stuff in my room. Like, why are you listening to Savage Garden? But at the same time, you know, I'm the first person who can tell you everything Nas has ever done. So I think for me, it was just like, it was a blessing at the same time, and being able to like communicate with everybody about anything. So it was interesting. I was really lucky that I grew up in a space where like acceptance was like just a thing. Like that's just what we did.
When you graduated, you went to Northwestern, and you were pre-med to start. That's a pretty far cry from where you've ended up.
So far.
So far, yes. I guess, what was your interest in medicine, and how did you decide to, pivot?
I never really had an interest in medicine. I grew up in a space where everybody was a doctor, attorney, an educator, a cop, but it was very quintessential. My godfather is a heart surgeon. So I really looked up to him, and he was completely a father figure for me then and now. So I was just like, how could I get the closest to emulate and mirror something that felt like that? He was the coolest guy. He had the coolest Rolex. He had the most amazing red Porsche, and he was just like smooth. So in my head, I was like, and chic. So I was like, okay, I could kind of still live in this world of like coolness, but I didn't know anybody who worked in fashion. That wasn't a thing. The closest thing I thought about was fashion was the person who worked at Neiman Marcus, Dillard's, or J.C. Penney's in St. Louis. Like that was the closest thing. So I had to lean into what felt still cool or had some type of sparkliness to it. And, my godfather, Dr. Knight, like he kind of had that. So I leaned into the closest thing, and I was like, I guess I'm gonna go into medicine. And I wanted to go to a place that was still close enough but far enough, which was Chicago, which is metropolitan. It's one of the leading, a lot of people don't know this, it was like one of the leading spaces in fashion. Most people who come from fashion or have some type of really interesting, cool connection with fashion it's from the Midwest, and it's Chicago.
Interesting. So what was it that happened, when you got to school that sort of gave you that confidence to step out of the pre-med program and to switch to the arts?
I got to Chicago a week early. I met someone who's still a really good friend. I met her, and she walked in, and I'll never forget, I was in a store. She walked in, and I was going to go spend my only $500 that I was supposed to have. It was supposed to stretch me out for food. I went into a store and I bought a designer backpack, and it was $475 in tax. It was like I had to take out cash to pay the rest. And I saw this girl walk in, and she had, to me and to people in the fashion world, she had, at this particular time, Marc Jacobs was at Vuitton, and she walked in with the Louis Vuitton Steven Sprouse pochette, and she started talking to me about art school that she was at. And that stuck with me, and I would go to school and I would just daydream. And then eventually one day I just said, you know what? Excuse my French, fuck it. I want to try this art thing. Still had no clue what a stylist was, a creative director, never knew what that was. And I started hanging out with more art people, and then they start talking about fashion and design. And that's kind of what triggered me to just take a leap of faith and hopefully not be killed by my parents. But that's where I landed. I didn't tell them. And
You didn't tell your parents?
I didn't tell them. I just stopped. They were still paying, but then I stopped. And then eventually I told them, and it wasn't received well at all. It was kind of like, you need to know, you have to, how are you? And it was a really, that classic, I'm going to say this a lot. It's that classic, American fear of like, you have to do this. We know this works. And I went from gut instinct, and I had that, all that fear, all it did was constantly push me to do and try things. And it was all trial and error. I worked at so many luxury, retail, from Saks to Cynthia Rowley to, the Coleman. It was just like I worked at all of them. And then I just kind of had to create this hustle, and I started selling vintage clothes to like my college friends.
I was curious, what were the most instructive things that you learned in that time that you were selling luxury goods, like working at Cynthia Rowley and Vuitton and whatnot?
People don't know what they want. I learned that, and people People don't buy products, they buy a feeling that you give them. And I realized that by working in all those places. I was like, wow, people aren't coming to these stores to show up to buy like the cool clothes. Like that's the bonus. They're showing up for this relationship and these feelings that I give them. That's what I end up taking away from everything. So now in my business now I realize it's just like it's how I show up that what people are buying. It's how what I give in those intimate moments is why people come back or they request me. So it has nothing to do with product. It's all about my relationship and that whatever that vibration that I decide to bring to that person. And the clothes and the shoes and the jewelry is all a bonus.
It's interesting. When you think about, obviously styling has many different components to it. How much of it do you feel like is your eye and your sense of sort of the creative, and then how much of it is the salesmanship and the ability to sort of manage these relationships?
20% is the actual merchandise. 20% is the actual merchandise. 20%, part of that 20% is your point of view, right? So that combined you can curate and cultivate a look, right? The other, that huge amount that's left over, is reading a room and showing up in this like shining light of magicalness that anything you want can possibly happen. So I show up all the time as this magician. Like you would never know that the sneakers that you wanted, somebody had to stand in line for it, or I had to call this person, or I had to, offer something else up in order for Noah to have the sneaker that he really wants, those limited edition XYZs. So that's the huge percentage of that. It's bringing that particular like moment of magic and fantasy and never hearing the word no. In my particular business, what I'm good at is you never experience no. And that is more than, a Dior with a Dior gown with a Cartier necklace. They're like, oh, you said it's yes. It's yeah. This is the only place that I get to hear yes. And we live in a world where like everybody has been told no so much that I give you this space of comfort of being like, yeah, that works, cool, yeah. And a lot of times people never realize that I've said no the whole entire time.
In those moments as you started working in retail and you start to sort of, activate this superpower, were you conscious of it, or at what point did it hit you that this was a sort of extraordinary talent that you had?
I realized it very early on, and it was kind of bad how I realized it. I was able to maneuver and move through school very easily with that. I realized there was this space of like charisma and ease that I had when it came to talking to people and romancing people. I realized very early on it was more about romance. And once I really gathered it and knew how to actually use that for good, it was in Chicago and it was in retail when I was like, oh, this is how I can do it. But I would say things and I was being extremely honest, and it just turned into something larger than me. And I've just always kind of been able to read a room and just kind of know what that person wants, what that person needs, what that person missed out on yesterday. I was able to actually I could reignite that pain or that missing or that no. And then by the time they leave me, everything that happened that past day that was no, and it was the trauma, I was able to smooth it over, and now we're in paradise. It is the weirdest thing, but I realize what I do is exactly what I want for myself every day. So I just give people what I want for myself every day when I talk to them.
Do you think about it in a conscious way? Do you strategize on how to sort of I don't want to say manipulate, but how to, I mean,
Well, no, I mean, also fair. Manipulation, yeah. I think.
but exactly. But when you go into a situation, are you consciously thinking about the room, the personalities, and how to balance it all, or is it something that just comes to you, sort of?
It's like instinctual.
Okay.
It is instant. It is instinctual. It is instant. And I honestly, I don't think about it. I honestly do not think about it. And just trying to think about it, I don't remember an experience of being like, I'm going in to do this. I normally go in super nervous. Still to this day, working with the most impactful culture changing people on the planet. Every time I meet someone new or start working with someone, I am fully internally paralyzed and nervous. But to know me is to know I don't show up that way.
No.
I'm like on, right? But I'm physically paralyzed I'm anxious, I'm nervous, and I'm just like, whew. And then once the door opens, it's so strange how it just disappears, and then this person, my representative, shows up. It's the wildest thing.
Where do you think in your sort of like formative life, were there any experiences in particular that you think sort of pulled that out of you as a child, as a teenager?
I think also it's just like to be, pretty obviously open in this interview. Yeah. It's just, I think for me, it's just like, I grew up in a super, when I say conservative, I don't mean in like views and rights. I just mean conservative as in the sense of like classic Americana way of picture perfect situation like that. But I also grew up as internally as an artist, internally as completely different than my siblings, and also gay. So I was like always, the way I wanted to show up is like I had to make sure that everybody else around me felt good about me being. Mm-hmm. So now when I think for me that helped, as traumatic as it possibly sounds, it actually helped me adjust to me. And then everybody else is secondary. So yeah. Through those years of like adjusting, making sure everybody feels good, I was like, whoa. I figured out that like, wow, if everybody adjusts to me, I'm chilling. Like, so that's where I think in those spaces of walking in feeling paralyzed and feeling anxious, I think when that door opens, in that split second, that conversation that I've had with myself of being like, oh, they will adjust to you. And that's what normally happens.
Crazy. So you leave school and you move to New York, mm-hmm. and you open a vintage store, mm-hmm. Down in Soho. How did you put that together as a 20-something? Where did you get the inventory from and the startup capital and all that kind of stuff?
I had no startup capital. It was not that. I was selling vintage clothes in Chicago to at this point, they were the coolest, hottest girls everybody wanted to date. And I would meet them at the store, and I would meet them at my retail place where I worked. And I'm like, oh, you know what you can wear with this? So I would go to the south side of Chicago.
So wait, so you're selling them clothes in the luxury
I'm
store?
selling you Chloe to all the stuff.
And then you're telling them, but on the side, I've got this other thing.
Yes. Okay. This other thing that's gonna make this, and it's gonna feel more special. Like, how many people walked in the store and seen the same thing that you're trying to, I know we love it, it's great, whatever. But I got this other thing. So I would go to this vintage store on the south side of Chicago. And this is when I talk about how important Chicago is to fashion. It's because at particular points, and still to date, those humans spent so much money on fashion because that was the foundation. You think about the Midwest, it's the middle of America, it's the foundation of everything else that's going on. I would go to in these dilapidated neighborhoods, and they would have these days where they're like, Citizen Wednesday or half off Mondays. And I would go and they would give you a trash bag. Anything you can put in a trash bag for $25. So I got so hip to how to shop. And initially I would just go there and be like, I just want some cool, I need some old Levi's. And I would go, and then one day I went and I'll never forget, I saw Gucci shearling And I was like, what? And I was like, okay, put it in the bag. Then I just started to, now I would go strictly, I would go look through clothes from the top of the hanger and I would just push back. And this way, all you're seeing is the labels. So I would see Ossie Clark, Issey Miyake, Dior, Gucci, blah, blah, blah. And I would just, I wouldn't even look. I just saw the labels, I would just throw them in. I would get them back to my apartment. I would look at them. I'm like, oh, this be fresh. Like, what if I just cut this, like made it short, just bring it to life, make it more modern. And then I start selling. And I would have people over. We would just drink. And they would, I mean, I'm selling stuff for like $10 to $35, right? It was like Gucci, all the good stuff. So one day, one of my friends was like, let's go to New York. Let's just like go to a flea market and set up a flea market. Cut to, we get there, we set up a flea market. It's whack. It's off of like West Side Highway and Hell's Kitchen, like random. And it was whack. So we walking in Soho, and long story short, we call this number. This kid picks up, and it's the son of the owner of all the buildings. And you can tell he's like party kid. He was like, you got $1,500. You can rent the space for the weekend. We're like, word, like great, this is amazing. We get the space. We open it up. We're only supposed to be open for Saturday to Sunday. We get there, we talk him out, we give him the $1,500. He was like, I was like, well, can we just set up, we just want to set up so we can open Saturday morning. So we're setting up, doors open, and people walking past. Music is, we like listening to music blasting. People are walking in, and people are like, oh, what is this place? I don't know this place. And I'm just like, oh, word. Like, and I see it. It's like Meg Ryan. Like, it's everyone walking. I'm like, holy. I'm just like, okay, so the $200. They're like, oh, okay, cool. I'm like, oh, shit. Like, this is wild. 150? Oh, sure. 500. Oh, cool. By Sunday, we made $75,000.
Holy shit.
It was like, it was a hot, like that hot Soho. It was wild. And that was it. And we basically were the first people to coin pop-up shop.
Crazy.
So that's how it happened. And we had no lease. We had nothing. We were paying the son, and he never knew how much we were making. And I was like, oh, you need $1,500? That's it? Oh, okay, cool. Like cash. He would come in like clockwork every Wednesday. Boom. And then eventually, I began to meet people. I mean, Vogue Road as it was like the models hangout. Then we started reading books about it. It was where African Bombada, like, it was like his studio. It was like Keith and like Basquiat, they would all hang out down there.
In this space?
Yeah, 112 Green.
That's crazy.
It's a book about it, and we just randomly, and it took a lot of people who grew up in the neighborhood who would come into the space, and they would just like tell us the stories about the space. And we're like, yeah, they were like Shaka Khan, this used to be the space. You'd come down and you'd see the book, and it's like, it was wild. Like, you would just see all the stuff that would happen there. And it just turned into a life of its own. Like, all the cool kids, the downtown cool kids would come and they would just hang out, and we would have alcohol there. Probably shouldn't have that, but everybody would come and they would like drink and hang out, and then all of a sudden there would be people from like Ralph Lauren just walking down the street, and then they would stop in, and then they would be like, what is this place? And then all of a sudden we began to do design inspiration for those companies. And it was just like out of nowhere. It was just like, okay, you're sitting in these design rooms, and they would say, hey, all we want you to do is go find white t-shirts. And I'm like, bet, easy. Fly, get on a plane, fly wherever, bunch of white t-shirts. And then all of a sudden you would see your thing that they bought from you on the runway. And you'd be like, oh my God, that's the thing that we showed them, but it's in red now. Like, so you would see that. So that was the beginning of my career, but I was strictly based on retail. And there would just be so many people who would come into the store. It was honestly wild. And you got to see celebrities at their most vulnerable, like when they're shopping and they're like trying things on and it doesn't work, or they're feeling weird about it, or they really like it, and because it's vintage, it's one of one. So it's like, it was actually pretty wild.
That is crazy. So as you're doing this, what were you thinking as far as your career? Like, did you have any sort of like medium or long-term goals or sense of like where this was going, or was it just like, yo, we're making money, this is amazing, each day is more fun than the last?
It was literally, we are making so much money and I'm going out every night. Like it was literally, it felt like that. I got to be around clothes. I got to be around fashion. I got to like meet these most incredible people in New York City who would tell me all these fantastic stories. But there was never a moment where I was thinking about what was next because I was so full. Like if you could only imagine how the type of people that you get to meet on a day-to-day basis like that in Soho, which is like, you know, you have the classics and you have the internationals that come there. And some of my best friends are now some of those people that I met there.
I was gonna say, what was that like coming from, you know, St. Louis, and obviously you got a taste of it in Chicago, probably working in those luxury retailers, but to be in the heart of Manhattan and hobnobbing with celebrities and executives, you know, from different entertainment, fashion, etc.
I mean, it was wild. Like first meeting Rihanna. I mean, like meeting Rihanna who's coming in like, whoa. And then also there's moments where like, I'm talking about the height of Lindsay Lohan. Like the height of Lindsay Lohan, like
Just Mean Girls.
Like, you know what I'm saying? It was like the height of that. It's just like, it was really funny. And I got to witness like in real time what people were saying, like the Us Weekly and the People magazine at the height, like seeing people being chased by paparazzi. It was great. Like it was the first time I remember going to the Mercer and sitting there every morning because at this particular time I lived downtown and I would go to the Mercer to have a coffee, and I'll never forget sitting across from Karl Lagerfeld. Karl Lagerfeld was sitting there. It was Karl Lagerfeld and I think it was Cara Delevingne. I almost believe it was her. And I'm sitting across and I'm like, wow. And to my head, I was like, oh, why did I wear this Comme des Garçons sweater? Like I'm just playing all these things. I'm like, oh, I knew I should have, like, I had a vintage Chanel jacket I should have wore. And then saying to myself, I think that might have been the tipping point, saying to myself is one day I'm gonna get to work with a major model and I'm gonna go, I know Karl Lagerfeld's gonna know who I am. And here you go, I'm backstage at one of his last shows, and he was sitting on the sofa with one of my clients who became, ended up getting a contract with him, and I'm there, and he says something really kind to me, and then here comes Pharrell walking in, and here comes and it's just like, and it's really, really wow how just how it happened. So New York was a magical fashion moment for me.
That's crazy. So I understand that in that period you meet Gabrielle Union and become friends, and that she sort of inadvertently ends up sparking what will become your styling career. How did that happen?
So just in natural form, it was just one of those things where it was just like, Gab and I become really good friends, and she goes, are you going to Art Basel? And I'm like, oh, I'm not really going to go. She was like, you should come. And I'm like, all right, cool. And she was like, well, bring me something to wear. And this is just like frank conversation. Like, all right, cool, I'll bring you some stuff. I got a bunch of stuff. And I bring like 3 or 4 dresses, and it was like a Lanvin, like a vintage 1960s Lanvin, and like an old Azadine Alaya, and there was probably something else. And she goes to this event and she wears this like multicolored polyester Lanvin, like kind of like hostess with the mostest dress. And it was just in my head, it was just like, I'm just helping a friend, we're going out that night. And then a day later, or a couple of days later, it's on Vogue. And then it says Jason Bolden, purveyor of style. I was like, huh? What? Huh? Like, what is happening? And it kind of snowballed into that. And all of a sudden, like, I was like, oh, I'm a stylist. And it was just like, okay, I never knew about sending a request email, didn't know about, how it all worked, what the politics were, like how up and down, how shady, how like sad and happy, the business is. But that sparked it all.
I was gonna say, how would you explain to someone that knows nothing about the industry what a stylist does?
Okay, so a stylist is someone who curates and creates identities and looks. So at some point in your career, you have a fashion profile. And what a fashion profile is you can look at it as a playlist, right? And every time you go to a song, like that song is for happy, that song is for sad, that song is a party song, that song is to get a little rough. Your fashion profile is the exact same thing. People can look at it and be like, wow, that person can do glamour. Wow, that person can do edge. Wow, that's street style. Wow, that's like, sporty and cool. So a stylist helps you curate and create a fashion profile.
Interesting. And what are these sort of more tactical parts of actually operating the business of being a stylist?
A lot of people only see the end. So you always see the photo that we all get to experience. So that's the glossy, pretty finale, right? But before you get to that, there's so many different things that happen. The minor first step thing is the talent has to be going to something, right? So that has to happen. So when that happens, you have to figure out what that carpet looks like, what that moment looks like, and you start working backwards from that. So then you send out requests. So a request is you can shoot an email to a brand. It could be Louis Vuitton. It could be just, any of groups of things, and hoping that someone's going to respond to you and say, yes, I would love to dress that person. Can you please send me selects? So you send selects, and then they respond back to you, and they may say, this is the only dress we have. So you do that. You do this wide net of that. It could be anywhere from like 10 to 50 emails at one time. You just send them all out. You get a response, you do that, you set up a fitting, right? You get the fitting together and you do the fitting with the client. And what a lot of people don't understand is in those particular moments, that's when your magic has to happen. Because now you have to convince a client to understand your point of view and why your point of view is so valuable and why it's going to transcend outside of just a carpet into a campaign or, money while you sleep, if you will. And then once you go through that particular process, they wear it. You hope you get good publicity off of it. And it kind of becomes a snowball effect. And then people kind of, by word of mouth or by just imagery, people reach back out to you. There's a really tricky part when it comes down to dollars and cents, though, right? No dress is free, right? So people will come in and they'll say, hey, I have 25 cents, right? And it may take me $3.25 to actually complete the job for you. And a lot of people don't know that from the outside. They just think it's just like you get a pretty dress on someone or you get a cool pair of sneakers for someone, and then voila, it happens. There's so much money that is lost during this whole process. So you have to really think about first going into styling as a business. Like how do I constantly lead with success, right? Financial success, because there's so many people in my business that are not here anymore. You don't hear about them because they are basically flat broke and we don't know their names anymore, right? So, and a lot of that started from just not starting from business. So you just have to really be about self-preservation financially when you come into this business, because it's also very quick and nothing's free. Nothing is for free at all.
What are the revenue streams for a stylist? Like obviously you have clients that pay you and presumably magazines and other media outlets that will pay you for your services, but I feel like that's only one portion of the sort of
but magazines. This is the funny thing, right? So in my particular world, there used to be this point of like hierarchy in a sense, right? If you worked in editorial, you were it. Like your voice, your eye was the only thing that counted. Now, as the world has shifted, which has always been this way, celebrity styling is where the real money is. So now most people in editorial, you can also notice, most people in editorial are now leaning towards celebrity styling because we have made so much money compared to them.
Yep.
We've made so much money over the years, right? Where we were the ones who people would look down on, like, oh, you don't really know. You're just a celebrity stylist. We do editorial. You know what I mean? It's just kind of like, okay, whatever, dude. But now it's a different thing. So A, you don't make money in editorial.
Well, I was going to say, because coming from working at a magazine for
Listen,
20,
you've hired
magazine
me
for 20
for
years.
you've hired me for something before.
It
And I
is-
was like,
it's enough to,
yes.
yes.
But it's in the world of
It'll
like,
cover your Uber there
yes,
and back.
exactly.
That's about the
But
extent.
visually, to the consumer, to the planet,
Yep.
like, this is big. I'm walking into these big buildings and I get all the clothes. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's this air about it. But when you really kind of lay down, you know, the bank statements, most people on my particular side supersede those people. So just to be clear, that's a different life. So editorial is a different life, and that money is very different. And then when it comes to my side, it can be very lucrative, but you just have to be, you have to have talent that believes and supports you and is just open to see you thrive financially as well, right? There's also a space where, like, I've learned very early on that you have to diversify everything. So I do a lot of ghost designing, creative direction. I probably shouldn't say ghost design, but I do. I do loads of creative direction. I work really closely with a lot of like the leading brands. And then I do other things outside of that. So you have to just diversify it all. And a lot of people don't understand that just by just looking at what we give to the world on social or just, you know, through PR and publicity. You don't know a lot of the other stuff that goes on behind in order to, you know, keep that revenue constantly going and flowing.
I was going to say, I imagine it's a fairly sort of complicated algorithm that you have to run in terms of you are creating client relationships, you are managing brand relationships. The better your brand relationships, the better the clothes that you can pull for
Yep.
the clients, the better the brands, the higher the clients. You know, do you sort of in your own head create a plan each time you add someone to your roster of like how you are going to sort of help level them up?
Yeah, for me, like what I've kind of am really excited about for myself personally, what I've done with my career is like I didn't base it just strictly on a really beautiful look. My idea was, how do I create an opportunity that's larger than just a look? Like, how do I create an opportunity that is cultural, creates visual possibility? So for me, I've decided to just like push it way broader than just the clothes. And I think about what my brand relationships are like, right? So if I'm really consistent and kind and courteous when it comes to my brands, but when I pick up a new client, I'm very conscious and clear with them what the possibility can be, right? So if you're someone who is number 16 on a call sheet, it might be really hard, and you're new to the business, it might be really hard to get you in a leading brand. But if you work with somebody like myself who has great relationships, has proven to create, fashion worth, then there's a possibility you could show up in one of the leading brands. But it's interesting. It's really interesting in the space of like how you can break someone by just fashion.
So I was going to say, the role that you play in your clients' sort of professional lives goes a lot deeper than just the clothes that they're wearing on the red carpet. Is that fair to say?
It's extremely fair to say, because I sometimes sit with people and I ask them, like, what is it that they really want? And they start telling you that, and sometimes you have to, like, I repeat, I don't say no, but I walk you outside of the no and take you to another place that makes more sense for you. And a lot of times that's what it's about. Like, I have to tell certain people, like, oh, I really, really like this brand. I'm like, probably not the one for you. You should probably look at this brand, because this brand speaks to you. This brand is going to understand it. Like, you're going to be able to wear the things you may like that just on the runway, But when you get it in front of you, that's not what you're gonna want. And now you're gonna be annoyed. So it's, it also goes back to a conversation you and I was having earlier about like everybody assumes they can be a stylist, right? Everybody has an opinion about how the look showed up or what they would have done. But there's so many layers to that, and that goes to relationship. There's so many layers of like being in a room with someone and knowing them personally and knowing that they hate the color blue. They hate the color white. And there may be stipulations that you have to work around. And it's like, it is not as seamless as just like going to get anybody can go and get a cool this and bring it to someone. It's not as seamless as that. So once you realize like relationships and people have boundaries about certain things, or people have political beliefs about certain things, or religious beliefs, or just like, there's so many layers to just get to the final image that everybody sees and then everybody has a critique about.
Say, what would you say are like the least glamorous parts of being a uber elite stylist?
Listen, I have a lot, but I think I've seen a lot of weird stuff. But I think the one thing is like you live in a world of it's very wow, that's wild. People just don't say thank you. You know what I mean? I think that's the most bizarre thing. People don't say thank you, and it's also because it's so fast. And you may feel it, or you may have, you may feel like very thankful, but people don't say thank you enough. And it's the most bizarre thing to watch from adults.
What was the process? You put this dress on Gab and you have this moment, and that starts a snowball where you get inbound interest into, you styling people. Mm-hmm. What was the process for you not knowing, when you started this, any of these details that we've just shared? What was the process of discovery? And how did you sort of like figure it all out? And how many times did you have to stub your toe or commit a faux pas along the way?
It was sad. It was really sad once I started to like get into things and realize, because I started my business off still like pulling from my archives of vintage stuff, or, going to different stores, like going to Barney's and Neiman's and Saks and Bergdorf and buying stuff on my own personal credit card because I thought that's how it was supposed to go. I mean, it was horrible, but I would buy things, put it on clients, and then return it. Like I would literally have bought like a tag gun to re-tag clothes, because I also had this idea of like, they need to be in this in order to be received a particular way. But I didn't know any of it. I went for a very long time not knowing. And then one day I started gathering enough funds, and I got an assistant who worked for a really big stylist. And she came in and she did everything. She was like, oh, you don't know this person? Oh, you don't, oh, we're gonna send it to, so when is the fit date? And she was like, da, 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 da. She was doing everything, and I was like, oh no, what is happening? So I actually learned from an assistant who left a big stylist and came to me. So that's how I learned everything.
That's crazy.
Wild. It was wild. And then when I started sending emails, because at one particular point, people didn't know I was styling people, because they were like, who is this like ghost stylist who's styling these people, and people are wearing Celine, and it was bizarre. And then when those emails start happening, the heads of the PRs would like reach out and want to take me to lunch or dinner, and then that's how I met people. And then still to today, I'm still learning stuff. I'm like, wait, we can do that? Well, that's weird. Like, so now that I'm like behind the curtain, like I don't have to experience those things that I experienced back then. So it's, she was helpful, and I'm grateful for her.
What, you talk about this transition from, and I, having worked in media, saw this, where like the more amateur type stylist did a lot of buying, and the ones who were super pro pulled almost everything, and maybe they buy, to sort of add on, but it was either vintage or pulled. But the pull requires that you have to anticipate what people are going to want to be wearing in 4 to 6 months, which is a very different thing from being able to look at what people in Soho are wearing and then going and buying it and shooting someone in it. How do you forecast for your clients in that kind of, with that sort of lead time? And also, what's the process of convincing, a client to sort of step out on the edge and do something that may not be in fashion now, but
I mean, when it comes to things like that, when forecasting and things like that, for me, it's still very instinctual. Like if I like something and if I like something and I'm like, oh, that particular body type, that particular personality can hold this, it makes sense. So I do it all the time, but with clients. But I'm super lucky that everybody that I've worked with longer than 5 years, longer than 4 years. Like it's like almost double digits at these points, that they just trust, and they've seen the proof. From when I say let's push for this, they've seen the proof, and it translates into other things outside of that. But it's hard because now we live in a world where the point of views, the opinions are a bit more. That's largely, seen at this point with social. Where in the past, if you put somebody in something, we can use Nicole Kidman for an example. She wore this John Galliano chartreuse dress to the Oscars or the Globes or something like that. And it was a fashion hit, but we knew certain people actually didn't like it. But now it would have been everywhere. It would have been a meme. It would have been all those different things, and it'd been all over the place. There was some quietness to that only the fashion people and the powers to be were the ones who were saying it's beautiful, it's amazing. We understood why John Galliano did that stitching. Da, 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 da. Now it's not like that. It's just everybody has an opinion. Nobody understands why you did that. There's so many different nuances to everything that happens. This person could have. I've had clients who've been pregnant, and the reason that we wore this particular thing was to actually hide the pregnancy, but the audience is oh, that is so da-da-da, that person looks like this, and it's just there's so many nuances and reasons why. But I'm super lucky that I'm able to go to someone and foreshadow what's to come, and to say, hey, you can be the leading figure in this, and when this image comes out, or when these kids go purchase something, you have resonated with them, and that is what they remember when they go pick up that that Virgil sneaker, or that Comme des Garçons collaboration with something. You did it. That's an image that is burned into their mind and will live rent free.
Styling has this element that you can never predict how the ball is going to bounce, right? And I'm sure this has happened where you are in the room, that you like the look, the talent likes the look, their team likes the look, and then they hit the red carpet and it turns into a meme, or it is received poorly.
Yes, just happened to me.
Yeah. Does that make you anxious? And are there any instances in your career where you are I've felt so good about this, and
I think early on in my career, I was a bit more anxious about it, and I would get stressed out about it if in this particular moment, when I took the photo on my phone, it translated exactly how I knew it was going to translate, because I knew how to shoot that person. I knew the light. And then when they go to the carpet, it's just the light was horrible. You're not seeing any of those things. So in the beginning, it would stress me out, and I would feel a bit uncomfortable, or is the client going to fire me because it wasn't received? Right now, I have very clear conversations with clients. This particular look is for the fashion people. Everyone else on social media is not going to understand. They will end up purchasing this 6 months from now, and then they will forget everything that you wore and they said. So I'm very clear, very, very clear, very clear. And some people can handle it, and some people are you know what, Jason, can you just give me a jean and t-shirt? And I'm okay, fine. But I also need you to understand, you're not going to track. It's not going to do anything. And if you want something to do something, you have to do something outside of the norm.
I mean, yeah, it seems you have to take the gamble if you want the potential payoff.
Yeah, most things that we end up loving, or you go back to, or like what everybody has said no to, are all the things that everybody loves.
Have you ever had a client come to you after the fact and sort of maybe not apologize, but acknowledge that
Yeah.
you were in fact?
Yeah. A couple of times. Yeah, I've had it a couple of times, but like in those moments, I just make it a laughable moment to just kind of be like, you are not for everybody. And you know, for me, clothes are bonuses. Like, it's a bonus. And if you were like doing the thing that felt good and you felt good, and like, that's like, not to be cheesy, but that's the thing that tracks. That will track way further and deeper than just a good look. Like when you, like a lot of people, I use this scenario all the time. There's so many people that will come to you and they will say, I want to look like this person. And let's use Rihanna. I want to look like Rihanna. I want this. I'm like, you don't want to look like Rihanna. You want what Rihanna feels like when you see Rihanna. You could probably wear the exact same thing that Rihanna wore, but it's not going to translate that way. Rihanna gives you a feeling. It's like when people come to me for a shoot and they're like, we want to shoot this. They show you a photo. We want to shoot this. I'm like, you're not even talking about the clothes. You're talking about the mood and the vibe. So it has nothing to do with that. So if you can translate your mood, your vibe, your confidence, like your commitment to the look, that's it. It has nothing to do with the clothes. It has nothing to do with the clothes, the glam, the lighting that day. It's the mood and your commitment to who you are.
I mean, it seems like so much of styling is about this sort of psychological chess game with the talent to get them into a place where they feel confident and comfortable. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's like what I tried to do outside of the clothes is to get you to re-believe in yourself. And as wild as that sounds, it's like in a lot of cases, what we don't understand is like when you put when you're putting these layers onto a human form, that is the first thing that we see, right? So you're trying to get someone to first re-believe in themselves and like understand that like all the other stuff is just bonus. So if you don't receive it, if somebody doesn't receive it, then it's like I'm like, I'm not enough. I'm not a this, I'm not a that. But if your baseline is belief and like self-belief and like, oh, I'm solid, everything else is a bonus. And then you find yourselves in a lot of conversations that I have with clients, then we start laughing because most people are sheep. They follow, right? So we start laughing and we start seeing stuff and we're like, oh, or you look at collections that people have done and everybody like, you look at how Saint Laurent was all about super kind of crazy rock star, super tight, everything tight. And everybody was like, oh, I can never. Then you see it's all over the place. You think about like, you know, what Virgil did and like people are like, that's weird, that's strange, that's, oh my God. But then now it's just like everybody, like you can't, like it is that. It is just like once you have that solid foundation of like self-belief and like I'm solid, everything just seems to track and translate so much more.
What is the difference between styling a man versus styling a woman?
At this particular point, there is no difference. When I started, there was kind of a difference, but right now there isn't a difference. I think.
How so?
Well, men's fashion is like, it's leading everything right now. You can go to any place across the planet and you will see a guy with a point of view. There used to be a point, I can think there could be a point in time where there was like, okay, here's my staples, this is my thing. Now, men's fashion is it's so robust. So now there's more options, right? So guys are just a bit more interested. Now with women, for me, when styling women, it's just more about.
Wait, men being more interested though. Does that make your job more difficult or?
Guys are horrible right now. Dudes are horrible right now when it comes to fashion. It's the worst. It's actually really, it's pretty funny because you watch how involved they're so involved and they're so like, everything is everything, and it's very competitive. It's super competitive, and it's more, I've noticed now more than ever, they're more concerned of how people perceive them versus when I started with just strictly women. It was like very like, oh, this person had this on, this person had that on. I experience it so much more with men now. And I'm just like, I sit back and I'm like, wow, this is so strange. But it's also a light switch that happens for them. Because you could I started with some of them and they weren't like that. And like all of a sudden there's a light switch and it's like, whoa, I got it. Oh. And it's like, oh, I need these. Oh, well, what about those new retros? Oh, okay, so I was thinking that you saw that Kim Jones thing that they just did with Dior. And I'm like, no, I didn't see it. And it's my job, bro. I didn't see it. But it's interesting how it's shifting. And when you look at the dollars and cents, men are spending so much more money on clothes right now.
That's crazy. Didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's wild. It's really, really wild. And my women client they're just like, it's strictly on a mood. I notice with women, it's more of a mood. It's like, this is what I feel right now. This is what I want to this is what I want to convey. This is how I want people to feel when they see me. And which is sometimes is a bit more interesting because you get to unlock a different part of someone that you didn't know. It's just like, I have clients who are like super conservative and then all of a sudden they hit this mark and they're like, you know what? I want to be seen in a different light. I want to be sexy. I want to feel sensual. I want to feel strong. And then it's like, oh, cool. Like this is wild. Now we get to find a new person that we didn't know. And then we start going on this journey of learning like this person. It's interesting.
It seems like being a stylist, you are, part-time therapist, obviously helping them with their sort of image and almost like a PR type of role in certain ways. When you take on a client, like how many hours a week are you typically engaging with each individual?
I mean, it's wild. It depends. Like the crazy thing about for me personally, once I decide to say yes to someone, I'm fully in. I'm all in. I'm super committed. Like it's more. We talk more. We talk a lot, and not just only about clothes, but we can talk about all type of things, and it also helps inform me how to pull clothes from you. Like if I was talking to someone, they're like, oh, this is going on in my life, blah, 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 blah. Did you see this? Oh, I want to do that. It helps inform me how to pull for you. Because I'm like, oh, you're in this space. So maybe we should just do strictly super tailored. Like, let's do this. And then they show up and their thing is like, wow, how did you know I needed this? Because it's also the biggest thing is you have to listen. People tell you exactly what they want. So it's just, it's really interesting how it becomes, it's super emotional. It's just really emotional. And sometimes I leave fittings and I can't talk. Like I go home and I just need to like shut off because you're in a space of empowering people all day long. And for me, like I feel rewarded from it, but also I never realized how taxing it is sometimes too, where you're in a space of uplifting, and your battery is really low. So I have to sometimes go home, shut the door, and just and recharge.
Do you have a set number of clients that you can sort of deal with at any one point in time, or?
I think I have a lot. I have a lot right now, but I'm in a space. I'm super lucky to be in a space where I can say no. And at this point in my career, when it comes to someone not being as recognized or not being a star, I get to really hone in and really dissect and be like, wow, there's people that I meet, I'm like, that's a star. And I want to work with that person. I know you may not have the funds or the means or the whatever, but I want to be here from start to finish with you. So I'm in a lucky space where I can kind of pick, but I have a lot of clients, and I have a lot of big clients, big clients.
Yeah. After the 2021 Golden Globes, there was an article written by WWD that rubbed you the wrong way and inspired you to go on Instagram Live to sort of air out some thoughts. What was it that bothered you so much that you felt that need to address it?
I just think in this particular business that I'm in, it has never been a business that has been for or truly made for someone that looks like me. And in the height of everything that was going on, I just felt like it didn't feel fair. And I'm just in a space of just fair. Like everybody has a job, everybody understands what it is, and it just didn't feel fair.
What was the critique or the
It was
sort
just
of
one of
implication of the
I
article?
honestly, to be completely honest, I'm forgetting, but they used a picture of my client who basically woke the carpet back up. This is in the height of like, the pandemic. Everything was just dark and
Which client was
sad.
this?
It was Cynthia Erivo. She wore a Valentino couture gown. It was like neon green. It was like basically made you feel like a Jetson. It was really cool, and it was just like sunshine. It was just happy, right? In the midst of like chaos and darkness. And my business is about fantasy and like, creating those moments to kind of have a split second to forget what's happening on the planet. And it did exactly that. Everything was about how romantic this was. Fashion is back, like carpets are like, let's go. And I can't remember exactly what it said, but it was click worthy, and they used that image. And here is this smart, heavily accoladed actress, and here's someone like myself who works day in and day out, making sure that people that look like me get to hear yes more and more and more and more often. And in that particular moment, it just felt like it just felt like a jab. It just in a space of like.
And the article was sort of intimating that there was some burden that actors and stylists of color need to wear designers of color, or was it?
Maybe that's what it was. Yes, it was something about that. And yes, it was something about that. And I think they end up using another. They used her and then me, saying that, and then I think they used another actress who was black and her stylist was white, and she happened to. I don't know if it was that moment or another moment where she wore a designer of color, and it was just it just felt unnecessary. It just really felt unnecessary. It felt like clickbait. It felt unresearched. And to know me, it's just like I have a whole foundation set up where I send kids to college. I pay for like this like summer program for these kids to make these fashion decisions to go to college. And that's just the nature of who I am and what I've done, and it is what it is. But it just felt like a really poor taste, and a really kind of a moment that just wasn't necessary. We were like all celebrating, and it was like it felt like clickbait. That's what it felt like, and it just really upset me. And like, it really upset me in a space of like coming out of some darkness, and that was like, this was the light. We had the light, and then somebody was like, hold on, let me turn the switch off real quick. And I was like, oh, no, you're not turning the switch off. And I just came back with, as we say now, I just came back with receipts. And I was just like, who deems you responsible to like tell a non-true story?
No, I mean, it was a very, I would say, bold and gutsy thing to do, as, in a industry where you have to balance so many of these different relationships, and obviously press is a big one. So to, to use a parlance of the day, to clap back at Women's Wear Daily is, puts yourself in a somewhat precarious, potentially, situation. But it seems like it was mostly well received.
Yeah, and I'm like, I like Women's Wear Daily is amazing. They're super kind to me. We had a great conversation about it, and it was just, unfortunately, it was just it was just a hiccup, and it's fixed and it's great. But like, it's just, I think, again, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about how everybody has a response so quickly. Nobody takes a beat to properly research. It's just like, I'm gonna respond. and there's no pause to anything anymore. It's like everybody's like ta 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 send, But again, it was a perfect learning moment for everyone. It was a learning moment for myself in a way of just kind of like you have to stand up, and that was a learning moment for me to make a decision to stand up, and I stood up, and it made sense, and that's my foundation. Like what's right and what's right, and bottom line, let's just be fair.
Fair. After you put the dress on Gab and got the accolades in Vogue, you mentioned that things just snowballed from there.
Yeah.
While I know that when we think about like these moments in retrospect, it does our brains kind of like roll it all in together. But I'm sure that there was like a handful of very specific decisions that you made, and also connections. And when you think back to that period of really making that transition from being a vintage retail guy to a celebrity stylist, what were the most consequential clients that you added, and also looks that you put together, and what were the things that really kept pushing the dominoes over?
Oh wow, I did Taraji P. Henson for the Oscars for Hidden Figures, and this was almost like after her nomination for being Benjamin Button, and they went to the Oscars for Hustle and Flow, and then now here it is, Hidden Figures. And that particular moment was the initial stamp for Hollywood approval, if you will, for fashion approval, if you will. And that shifted everything. That look was so loud. I think it was at one point, they kept referencing it being as close in numbers as Princess Diana when she's walking across the lawn in this kind of off-the-shoulder black dress. And Taraji had on this crushed velvet navy blue off-the-shoulder dress by Alberto Ferretti. And they kept saying that like it was this thing with Getty about the search of the numbers or something. It was almost as high as that. And like this is stuff that at this point I wasn't thinking about. I was just like, I just want to make a beautiful dress. This was my first time at the Oscars. So she took me to the Oscars. So I was thinking about that. So that was one of those big moments. And I think about like my client Yara Shahidi and being able to like do a lot of those things that most people never get to do, being at one point a Chanel girl, a Prada girl, and now a Dior girl. It's kind of unheard of in my business. And then, I think now I've been able to like tap into so many different things. There's this point in time where like, stylists, particularly Black stylists, only had the capability of working with Black talent that reached back for them or wanted them. But now I'm in a space where like I have people like Angelina Jolie, Nicole Kidman, I have like people like that who are like, reaching out and want to work with you. It's a beautiful shift, and to kind of see that. And when those people decide to use their fashion privilege and give me a platform or support me, you see the doors open in a very different kind of way, versus when I just when I work with my other clients. So the business it's very, very interesting. It's very interesting.
I know that while you definitely embrace these new opportunities with these huge mainstream white Hollywood talents, it's also very important to you to maintain sort of your foundation.
Oh, that's my foundation.
Exactly.
Listen, I like what? Let's just always be completely clear and transparent. The only reason where I am is because of Black women. That is a point blank, and the reason that I will always work and forever work will be because of Black women. That is it. Fortunately, and nice that I get to work with everyone now, which how it should be. We should be able to work with everybody. You should show up with talent and work. That is it. Well, Jason looks like he can do this job. Amazing. Sure, you can work with whoever. But to be completely clear, I will always and forever be indebted to black women because I will always and forever work because of black women. That is a fact.
That's great. That is real.
So I mean, that it is what it is. Everything else is lovely and it's great and it's a bonus and it's nice to actually to meet people and know that like people see people, you know, and it's so lovely. But we worked in a business for a very long time and we still work in a business that where the discrimination and these ideas of you because of how you look can transfer over to your capability of working is the wildest thing.
Yes. I mean, it is among the most fucked up parts of, you know, the world.
The world and the world.
Yeah. Absolutely. You mentioned Taraji, and I know that she was, like Gab, among your earliest supporters, and also that she played a serious role in sort of like helping you to make that transition. What happened? How did she end up putting that battery in your back?
I met Taraji by accident. I was going to Sanaa Lathan's house and she was there and I met her and we all were drinking and we were just hanging out. There was no space of like trying to create a relationship, a working relationship. It just became a friendship. And then one day all of a sudden I get a call and I do her for a campaign or commercial or something. And it just kind of happened. And, you know, fortunately I got to work with somebody while they were on their journey, right? Like every time, and I say this to all the kids that I talk to, when your client goes to a place, if they're nominated for Oscar, an Emmy, a Globe, a Grammys, Critics' Choice, whatever, you're nominated. Because that is also your particular moment as a creative to actually show your work and you're showing up. And she allowed me for every one of those carpets to show my capability and show that like, oh, he can do, oh, wow, that's amazing. So she was able, she gave me free range and she was like, I trust you, do it. That's why I hired you, do it. And it was really kind of beautiful. And it allowed me to just kind of create memories and create these beautiful fashion icon moments. And I've been lucky from then to now to have clients who still allow me to kind of, to do those things. I think of Yara at the Met, and she wore, like, we did this reference of like Josephine Baker who left America to go to Paris and was well received, and Yara wore, you know, a version of this couture Dior dress and we remade it for Yara for the Met. And that thing for me was like, it was, those images are like breathtaking. And I walk into shoots sometimes and I see the image on people's mood boards and like it's wild. Like I remember walking into sets and I see images and I'm like, oh, that's cool. But now to like walk in and see your imagery, and it's still funny, and not to like toot horn or anything, but it's so funny when people don't know you and then you walk into sets and like all of your photos are up there from all the clients that you work with and they're like, so we're thinking about like, we want to do something like this. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And then I wait for the client to walk in and be like, look at all the stuff we did. This is all of us. And then like the photographer, the production team was like, oh. So it's actually, besides that, I think it's actually amazing to walk into the space and see that my references are what we're looking at. Where my references, when I used to go on set, I used to just be like, I just need to see a Sade photo. Like now my photos are next to the Sade photos. You know what I mean? So it's wild.
That's dope. It's funny you say that about Yara and Taraji and her rise. And I think about this, and this goes across a lot of sort of creative disciplines where you're working with talent. You know, when you're growing up and you're a young person in the industry, you're looking at the stars of today and the people who work with them, and you want to be there. But as you're sort of speaking to, like, it's actually, to get there, the key is to identify that person of tomorrow and to create those relationships and to be a part of that movement, because you and they will both arrive together.
Yes. I think that's a really interesting topic to talk about, because some people just want to go straight to the, like I said at the top of this, everybody wants to go straight to the finale. Everybody wants to be right there. And if you are really smart and you really love this and you really want to do it and you really want to figure out how to be impactful, a lot of times you have to find people that you can start with, because that's growth, that's creating trust. And you get to like share those moments and experience those moments at the same time with other people who are doing the exact same thing. So it's some freedom in that. It's some creative freedom in that, that I think it's really smart. So for people who are launching into this, there's a part of it, like you have to suck it up in a case of just like, it may not be the most money, it may not be the person with the most visibility at that particular moment, but like this is a chance to, hone in on your art and like actually truly practice. Because for me, it was all practice. It was all trial and error. Like I was on a W shoot with her, and Edward Interfell was there, and like, this is somebody for me in my business. I'm like, oh, Edward, he's the cream of the top, And I walk over to him and I just say, hey, I just really need some help. I'm not getting a lot of responses on X, Y, and Z. And he goes, well, who do you want to talk to? And I was like, I would love to put on a John Bautista Valli dress. And he's like, hold on. Puts the phone up to my ear, it's Jamba. And it's like, great, and we got the dress. And then still today, I'm the best and closest friends with him. And I have people like that calling me saying, who's the next girl you have? Because we want her, because we know, like, you see it. Or who's the next guy you have? We see it. Like, what can we do? So it's interesting. So you just have to, like, you got to trust it, and you just have to be okay with, like, waiting.
What are the qualities that you look for in a talent?
I look at how truly how disconnected they are with fashion. For a star, right? When it comes to me and dressing them. I think about that because I love people who don't have time to focus on your job because they're overly focused on their job. So it allows you to show up and it allows them to be ready for you. Because at that point, they don't want to think about that. They want to have the person in front of them that they hired, that they trust, who knows them, that they can release and let go. So for me, that's the most important thing. I look at someone who is like, not truly, like they understand fashion, they get it, but not someone who's at home overly studying it, like it's their job.
Okay. And is there a certain sort of like charisma or sparkle? Like what is it about their talent that inspires you to think that, okay, this person might be around in 10 years or?
Oh man, I think about like, it's just hard. It's very hard to kind of even say it or it's not even something that you can touch or it's just bizarre. It's just it's not to sound like, it's like almost like an energy. It's literally an energy. And when you're around movie stars, I'm talking about quintessential Hollywood movie stars, it's this thing, it's this feeling, it's this like, I don't even know. It's a thing. It's literally a magical thing that goes over your body. And then it's just like, oh, you're not from this world. And I get that. I get that from people now. There's like someone like a Storm Reed. Like when I met Storm Reed at 14 and she sat across the table from me and I was like, what is this? This is bizarre. Like I think about Amanda Gorman. Like when I first met Amanda and I was like, this is strange. Like Michael B. Jordan has that thing. It's something that is not, you cannot touch it. It is a feeling that comes over your body. It is literally like falling in love. That's what it feels like. That's the only way for me to describe it. It's a moment of you are immediately immersed into them. And it's like you find yourself lost and it feels like you just fell in love with somebody.
It's crazy. In the world of celebrity styling, there are a finite number of stars, and I would imagine that there is some competition between stylists, but there's also collaboration. How do you think about those relationships, and how would you, if you were talking to a aspiring stylist how to manage their sort of peer relationships?
It's weird because I look at people in my business. There's people that I admire and I call every day still, and I'm like, they look at me and they're like, this is weird. Like, why are you calling me? Like, Lisa Cooper. Lisa Cooper, I talked to her. I talked to Jessica Pastor. I talked to Jean Yang. Like, there's just so many people that have been in this business, and I tell anybody, I'm just like, fine, like, talk to people. For me, it's just like, there's enough to go around. There's no need to be competitive. Every client, there's people who want to work with, there's clients that want to work with me. They're just not for me. And there's clients that I want to work with that work with someone else, but I'm like, that person is good for me. But it's just, it's fine. And then I forget about it because somebody else pops up. But the idea of being competitive and being combative and just being angry and upset because that person has that person or you want that job, it's like, it's enough to go around, but talk to people.
I was gonna say, what are there sort of ethical norms or rules of engagement that stylists respect?
Well, listen, now in the world, it's you're not supposed to slide in anybody's DM. You're not supposed to slide in another client's DM. I mean, there's people that you're friends with. I'm friends with a lot of people, and I've had in the past, I've had clients reach out to me, and I'm friends with the stylist, and then I'll call the stylist. Hey, heads up, this person just reached out to me. What's up with that? And if you're a solid person, most people are just like, wow, that person's wild, or blah, 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 or I knew this was coming. Actually, you would be really good for them. Or watch out, Jason, they're wild. So that's that way. But I don't come from a space of poaching people either, because I believe the same way you get people is the same way you lose them. So I don't come from that space, but it's also business. Nobody owns anybody. No talent belongs to anybody. They can wake up today and say, you know what? I don't want to work with Jason anymore. I actually like what Noah had on today. Noah, can you actually make, that's the nature of the business. Somebody told me the most promising thing in Hollywood is that people leave you. That is a fact. People leave you. And I was like, wow.
Is that difficult? Because you spend so much time with your clients, and for the most part it seems like you have really friendly relationships that sort of at least straddle the line between professional and personal. Have you ever had an awkward moment where either you decide it's time for you to stop working with someone, or for them, they decide that they're ready to move on?
I mean, one of my day ones, we're still the best of friends, but now she works with someone else. But going back to what you're saying is growth and journey. Our journey stopped. Our growth had stopped. I feel like we hit the top of the mountain. We had landed, we did everything. There's nothing else. There was nothing else per se for me. And I felt like what that person wanted was something else that was not where my life was going. That was not where my career was going. That was not my point of view. But you have to be okay with it. Yes, it stings, but it's like a shot. It hurts just for a second, then it's over with, But once you understand going into something that, you don't own this person, it's not that. Yes, there's people do bad business. People do really kind of nasty, not nice things, and how they decide to leave you or, go a different way. But also, it's just you realize that it's a business. It's really, really a business, and everybody is figuring out what works for them. So, I think early on I probably would have felt bad, but now it's just kind of I go into the space of, like I said before, earlier top on, you just diversify. So sometimes you don't have time to really process that's gone, because you're like, oh, I gotta do that, I'm busy, I gotta do something else,
So when you meet with a new client, are there any red flags that are an immediate, this is not gonna work?
When I meet with a client, they give you a red flag, most of the red flags are when they overly talk about I'm a star and I'm going to be a star and have all these big things coming out. And then let me show you these photos of what I want to look like. And I'm always like, ooh, yeah, no, it's just not going to work. Or if like, there's so many people, like if a client comes to meet me and they're with like their manager or a publicist or an agent and they're not alone, I'm just like, it's not gonna work.
I can imagine there's a lot of, if there's a bunch of people in their ear,
A lot of cooks in the kitchen, yeah.
Styling by committee, it's.
Whew. And listen, that's a thing. It's a real thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, how do you navigate that? Because, I mean, everybody has their teams and, you know.
I just think at this point in my career, I'm really upfront with people. And, like, I can't do my best work and I can't show up the way you want me to show up and the way that I know I should show up if there's so much noise around. Like, I'm into listening to good stuff and I like to turn good stuff up. But when it's bad, nobody wants to hear that. Turn it down and turn it off. You know, there's a lot of times when you're in fittings with people, and I say this to a lot of people, there is a really amazing blueprint that's already built for fashion. And if you some way, somehow figure out a way to make that blueprint work for you, the success rate is so high. And then there's times when like, I'll put just a black dress on someone, or I'm like, you should wear this beautiful, nothing Tom Ford, super tailored suit. And people are like, oh, why? We should have been in a red suit or a yellow dress. And I'm like, no. There's a reason behind everything that I do. And I just don't, again, it goes back, I just don't put clothes on people to put clothes on people. There's a reason for everything. So the fact that I put that black dress on you and I told you to wear no jewelry and to pull your hair back, there's a reason for that. For me, it's just like, you're a new star. I want people to recognize you and remember your face. There doesn't need to be a lot of distraction. And a lot of times people don't understand that. They want to come out and they want to peacock instantly. That's not a point of view. Like, we want people to kind of understand who you are and get to know you. And then you create an evolution. You come out peacocking, there's no other place to go.
How long is that process in your mind to go from day one to breaking them in fashion? It's
the wildest thing. Some people it happens overnight. And some people it takes a couple of years. It is wild. It is. I can tell you, I have this conversation. It's wild that you said I have that conversation all the time because I have to go into it saying exactly that. Listen, this is bizarre. Fashion is all gray. It's bizarre. You could break tomorrow, or you can break in 2 years. It is just bizarre. It really depends on what's happening. It honestly depends on what's happening in the world.
I was going to say, is it hard to work in an environment where the value of your creativity and your work product is so subjective and so subject to scrutiny and, you know, impression?
Well, I say this to people in my office all the time. I live in a world where every day I hope that somebody likes me. Every day. When I bring clothes to a client, I hope they like it. And if they like it, that means they like me. If they don't like it, that means like, oh, what did I do wrong? So I live in a world like that all the time. So that's the space that I have to live in, but then I also have to figure out in that space what makes me happy.
So to say, how do you balance, you know,
alcohol,
the need for affirmation alcohol. And also, yeah.
I think for me, it's just like, it's really easy. I just try to have people in my life that like, I can laugh about this beautiful chaos that I work in. And I try to find spaces where I can disconnect so I'm not jaded. So I won't go to my clients' movie premieres. I won't sit to a movie premiere. I'll go to the movies outside of that. Like, I figure out spaces that I can disconnect and become a consumer again, which is, for me, it's so fun. It's so like, it enlightens me. It gives me space to reimagine and recreate. So I just try to like completely disconnect myself from the business.
That makes a lot of sense. I know that in addition to your styling business, you also have a design studio with your husband,
Yep.
Adair Curtis, and you guys do all kinds of different projects, from
Yeah.
creative direction to home, interior design stuff. What is the key to operating a business with your spouse?
Don't talk about work at home. We try not to talk about work at home. We try to like leave work at the office, and it's like that. But we're two different separate humans. Like my point, I'm very instant. Like my decisions are instant. I don't think about, I don't need to sleep on anything. It's yes or no. And for him, it's the opposite. He has to digest it, has to do all these different things. So for us, that's the most complicated part about working together. But I guess that could be with anybody, any partnership that you have. But the key for us is like we don't talk about it. And then if it comes up, it's so quick and it's a shut off. It's like, hey, quick question, you have this money, can you do it? And I'm like, yes, no, and then that's it. So it's only urgent questions that have to be answered.
You've also, in addition to these other parts of your sort of more core business, done a lot of punditry and reality TV over the last 3 or 4 years. How do you see that fitting into this sort of larger arc of your career?
I think for me, it's just about more exposure. It's more exposure, and it also gives you a stamp of authority. So I just shot Next in Fashion again, the Netflix show. I did an Amazon. So I do all these things in a space of authority to kind of like, walk people through and kind of let them know what it looks like on this side. And sometimes it's just giving pure advice on what to do and what not to do.
How do the economics of styling work? Like how does one get paid by a client? Like, what is the nature? Is it an hourly rate thing, or is it an event, or are you getting a percentage of the overall spend, or how is it structured?
It's you have a rate, like, right? So your rate is your rate. So you think about, like, for example, for a musician, right? Like if you have a musician and their rate is $1 million to perform there. So if you hire me to dress you for the Oscars, the Grammys, I give you a rate. This is my rate. This is how much it costs, and this is what is involved in that cost. If you need a breakdown, this is why, this is how much, this is like when this number shifts again because of we went over. So it's mostly a rate. It's literally a rate. And when you work with most productions, they give you, some productions will say, hey, we're all in at this number. Or you have clients that's, they come to you, they want to work with you, and I say, hey, this is my rate. And then sometimes it scares people. Sometimes you also use it to scare people and it backfires on you. And then they're like, oh, that's all. And then you're like, I got to do this. Or sometimes people walk away because it's not what they intended on paying. Or sometimes for myself, if I like somebody a lot, I'll say, hey, this is my rate, but I like you a lot, and there's so much here that we can build, and the trajectory of your career is so interesting and so cool, and I just want to be a part of it. Let's figure something out.
Okay, but then, and all that money though doesn't go directly into your pocket, because you still have to pay assistants. You have to travel things across the country and back.
It's never enough, to be completely honest. It is never enough, and because you cannot quantify what styling is. And if we did, everybody would owe, I would be sending out invoices all day long. Most of us are underpaid by the service that we have to do. And a lot of people would be really shocked if you knew how much a lot of us were getting paid for particular things. But I can speak for myself, I still have to show up. And all I know how to do is work at this capacity and this level, even if it's like a $200 offering. You know what I mean? So I'm still going to give you $1 million service for a $200 offering.
And I know one of the things that, we've talked that is so important is sort of building this trajectory for the talent. And part of that means making connections with them for brands, getting them campaigns and whatnot. As a stylist, do you get a vig on those relationships, or how do you sort of factor into that?
It takes a very honest, kind, considerate human to look at everyone that is in the room when it's time to sign the contract and to ask the question, is Jason in this? Because I know Jason brought this to the table. Is he in this? That's all it takes. So if you have clients that do that, you have capability of reaping the benefits of curating and creating this relationship that you basically brought to the table. Because for me, I'm the bridge in between the brand and the talent. It is my decision and my choice what lands on my rack, right? So I make the decision to say, I only want this brand on my rack, right? So at that point, I've introduced something to a client, and that client now falls in love with it, and now I can give you the story and the journey of this collection. And then I can also go back to the brand and say, you guys really make sense together. Per se, without me, there may have never been a moment that could have happened, you know? So I'm super lucky that I just have clients who are like good humans, and they understand the value of everybody's job. And
so you sort of have to move forward in good faith for the most part?
Yeah, you really do. And you have those real conversations with people. Like, I'm the first person and the last person a lot of times on set. Like, I'm there before my clients get there, and I'm making sure that everything is the way they want it. I can go on set and be like, hey, she ain't like this. Hey, this is not gonna feel right for him. So like, I'm doing all these different jobs. Or like, I'll look at a collection and it may be super provocative, and I may be like, this doesn't work for my client, but like, I can show you how this can work for my client. And this is somebody that you've always wanted to work with, but the reason that they won't work with you is super provocative or super racy and it's super this type of thing. But watch this. And then there you have it. But again, we only see the finale of everything.
That's crazy. So when you look at sort of, you know, how your career has grown over the last few years, and it's really blossomed pretty dramatically in the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, crazy.
What are the ambitions? What are the things the itches you have not scratched yet? Where do you want to go?
The one thing for me is still on the list of things that I want to do. I really want to find myself at a creative director position someplace, because I do it every day with brands anyway and with clients. I want to go to like, you know, I really want to do like something like really interesting, like almost like bringing back United Colors of Benetton, or bringing back like The Limited or Esprit or something. I want to go into something very nostalgic and do a creative direction and kind of revamp that. That for me, in my career, that is the one thing that I'm so gung-ho on, and that's what I'm working towards.
You mentioned that some people, it can happen overnight. Some people, it can take years before they break. Are there any specific examples that come to mind of those types of scenarios?
I think of Amanda Gorman. You know, she's been around for a very nice amount of time, but once she read the poem at the inauguration, it was like the next day. Like, this girl's wild. I think about Yar Shahidi, who is also just kind of like, she is just like, it's like fashion was made for her, style was made for her. It's those type of people. Off the top of my head, it just, you know, it's quick. It's very, very quick. It happened very quick for them.
One of your more viral moments recently was a shot of Michael B. Jordan with the guns out.
Oh,
how did that happen?
What a lot of people don't know is like, he's in the middle of editing a movie, and he had to go to a premiere, and we had 15 minutes. We had to fit him, do the alteration and all of that. And I came in there, I was like, listen, I want you to wear this. And he was like, what? And I was like, you should wear this. And he was like, all right, cool, whatever.
And what was this?
It was a sleeveless Chanel vest with like these high-waisted navy blue pants, and it just went everywhere. And it kind of started a trend wherever, and after you see that, any guy that works out who's a celebrity has now walked onto a red carpet with no sleeves.
Chanel men's or Chanel's women?
It was a vintage Chanel's. I don't know if it was men's or women's, but it fit. It fit. It was vintage. It was wild, but it was really interesting because it was just like one of those things. He was like, "Are we doing this?" And I was like, "We doing it." And then he wasn't even on the carpet for 5 seconds, or it just went wild. But you know, that's a really important moment to share with the client when you can go into a space and be like, this is what we should do. And now we look back on it and we're like, and you see certain things pop up and we're like, kind of was out of the curve. Like it's really, really interesting. But that was pretty freaking cool.
One of the things that I found interesting, and this is just in the time that we've known each other, is obviously you have this very long-standing relationship with Gab.
Yes.
And you're around Dwayne for years and years and years. But it wasn't until about 2 years ago that you started styling him. How did you sort of make that transition? I would imagine, you know, it becomes somewhat loaded and higher stakes when you
as
have
a friend.
when you have 10 years of friendship.
Yeah. I mean, that was really interesting. I think that his transition into this kind of like this new version of a Renaissance man. He's an executive producer. He is an entrepreneur. He is the most amazing father. He is like all these icons and goats in all these different arenas. And the transition for now is to just kind of like, and I think he does it the best, where we lean into like real luxury is leisure. That is the pure definition of luxury, is leisure. And what we've leaned into in this particular moment with him, and he does it so well, is leisure. Like his luxury is pure leisure, and everybody wants a part of that. Everybody wants to kind of figure out, how can I look this particular way, but also be so comfortable, but also. So that relationship was interesting. And like, it's quite special compared to my other relationships, because it is, it feels like, you know, it's like a brother thing. It feels like that, where it's just like, I'm always trying to like, support my brother to do something. You know, and it's just like, oh, you should do this. Oh, can you, it's always that. There's never any hesitation. There's a lot of like banter and good times and laughing, and like we particularly don't talk as much about fashion as we talk more about style ideas, and just kind of like how does this make me, like how does this style make me feel, or like who am I today? Is it Harry Belafonte? Is it like Miles Davis? Am I giving you full on, you know, executive producer vibe where I just want to be smooth and feel like I have a cigar? Like it's those type of things which are really interesting to know, that somebody who comes from being such a like an honest and known athlete to be in a space where you're almost talking to someone whose everything feels like, you know, the creative direction behind the identity of a character in a movie with him.
That's crazy. What is the difference between a look and a moment?
Wow, that's a good one. What's the difference between a look and a moment? Okay, so a look is something that works. It's work, it's easy, it's now, right? A moment is a moment. It's going to live, and we are able to identify when, where, how, and why. That is a moment. A moment in time for me is like Angelina Jolie in Europe in a silver Versace chainmail dress. A moment is, you know, Dwayne Wade in this beautiful custom Burberry. A moment is Michael B. Jordan in this canary yellow Virgil Abloh for Louis Vuitton. Like, it's Yar Shahidi at the Met walking up the steps in Dior. It's Storm Reid at the premiere. It's like a product. It's like, those are moments, and moments reflect on inspiration, possibility, and though that lands for moments for me. So I think of a lot of things that I've done that's a moment, and there's a lot of looks that I've done, probably more looks than moments, because we live in a space where everything's very quick, so the moments take time.